Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about a discussion that has been making headlines across Britain. Not because it revealed some shocking royal secret, but because it exposed something far more powerful: how ordinary people are beginning to see Prince Harry's situation differently. The question being debated was surprisingly simple. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a minor family disagreement. But I don't believe that's what this story is really about. This conversation isn't about bedrooms, it isn't about palace logistics, and it certainly isn't about whether Harry gave enough notice. This is about something much bigger. It's about father and son. It's about reconciliation. It's about whether the institution has become so consumed by protocol that it has forgotten the very thing it claims to represent: family. So today, let's look beyond the headlines and examine what this debate actually tells us. Because, in my opinion, the public conversation is beginning to shift in ways the palace and the tabloids probably never expected. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely enjoy reading your perspectives. Let's get into it. One thing immediately stood out to me while listening to the discussion. Nobody seemed particularly interested in attacking Harry. That alone is significant. For years, we've become accustomed to television panels spending hours criticizing every move he makes. But this time, the tone felt different. Instead of asking whether Harry deserved sympathy, people were asking a much simpler question. That's a very different conversation. When the public starts asking why a father and son cannot find common ground, the narrative changes. It stops being about Harry versus the palace. Instead, it becomes about whether everyone involved has allowed pride to overshadow family. And I think that's exactly why this discussion resonated with so many people. Let's address the practical argument first. Some reports suggested that Harry couldn't stay because arrangements had to be made in advance. Security staff, accommodation, planning. On paper, that sounds reasonable. Nobody disputes that Buckingham Palace has protocols. But here's where I think many viewers struggled with the explanation. We're talking about Buckingham Palace, one of the largest residences in the world, a building with hundreds of rooms and an entire infrastructure designed to host heads of state, foreign dignitaries, and major royal events. So, naturally, people began asking themselves, or is it about something else? Because those are two very different questions. One of the panelists jokingly offered Harry a spare room in her own apartment. People laughed. It was funny. But underneath the humour was an uncomfortable truth. Think about what that joke actually implied. A television presenter publicly saying whether she meant it literally or not isn't the point. The symbolism matters. A stranger appearing more publicly welcoming than one's own family inevitably makes people stop and think. That's why that moment landed. Not because it solved anything, but because it highlighted how emotionally distant this entire situation has become. What impressed me most was when the discussion shifted toward parenting. Several presenters stopped talking about royalty altogether. Instead, they began parents feeling hurt, yet every single story pointed toward one common principle. That phrase kept coming back. One presenter even reflected on helping her daughter despite undergoing chemotherapy herself. Another spoke openly about supporting her son through addiction. These weren't royal stories, they were human stories, and that's exactly why they resonated. Because suddenly the discussion wasn't about princes, it was about parents, and every parent watching at home could understand that feeling. You don't stop loving your child simply because they've disappointed you. You don't erase the relationship because life became complicated. You continue hoping that one day things will improve. That's what family does. Now, does that mean Harry has done everything perfectly? Of course not. I've never believed anyone in this family is flawless. Harry himself has acknowledged mistakes. He's spoken about anger, he's spoken about grief, he's spoken about decisions he would probably handle differently today. But here's where I think some commentators continue missing the point. Acknowledging Harry's imperfections doesn't automatically justify permanent estrangement. Those are two entirely separate issues. Families survive disagreements every single day. The royal family should not be held to a lower emotional standard simply because they are royal. Another aspect that deserves attention is the timing. Harry wasn't in Britain for a holiday. He wasn't visiting for publicity. He was there because of an ongoing legal matter concerning his security. That context matters. For years, Harry has argued that his security concerns are genuine. Many critics dismiss those fears as exaggerated. Yet if extraordinary security arrangements are now cited as a reason accommodation became complicated, doesn't that indirectly reinforce Harry's argument that the threats against him are real? It's an irony that's difficult to ignore. The very issue some people have mocked for years continues shaping every visit Harry makes to Britain. That tells us this isn't simply a manufactured controversy. It's an unresolved problem. What also struck me is how easily the media moved away from the real issue. Instead of asking why Harry continues fighting over security, headlines quickly became, "Notice how the focus changes." The deeper questions disappear. The legal questions disappear. The conversation about threats disappears. Instead, we're left debating bedrooms. That shift benefits sensational headlines, but it doesn't necessarily help people understand the bigger picture. I also believe something important is happening with public opinion. People are becoming increasingly tired of endless royal conflict. They're exhausted by anonymous briefings. They're exhausted by competing narratives. They're exhausted by stories designed to paint one side as entirely right and the other as entirely wrong. Increasingly, people just want reconciliation. Not because they expect everyone to become best friends overnight, but because continuing this cycle benefits nobody. Certainly not Harry. Certainly not King Charles. And certainly not Britain. Imagine how different the headlines could have been. Instead of stories about withdrawn invitations, imagine photographs of father and son quietly spending time together. Imagine headlines talking about healing. Imagine the message that would send to millions of families experiencing their own disagreements. Sometimes symbolic gestures matter. Sometimes opening a door literally opens another door emotionally. I also find it fascinating that so many ordinary viewers seem to approach this from a parent's perspective rather than a royal perspective. That tells us something. People aren't necessarily judging Harry as a prince anymore. They're judging the situation as human beings. They see a father, they see a son, they see grandchildren, they see years slipping away. And many simply wonder, now I understand reconciliation isn't easy. Trust takes time. Words cannot be unsaid. Books cannot be unpublished. Interviews cannot be erased. Pain exists on all sides. I'm not minimizing any of that. But reconciliation doesn't begin when everyone suddenly agrees. It begins when someone decides the relationship matters more than winning. Perhaps that's the hardest lesson in all of this. As I watched this discussion, I couldn't help noticing something else. The loudest voices weren't calling for punishment. They weren't demanding more division. They were expressing empathy. That represents a meaningful shift. Whether people support Harry or support the monarchy, many are beginning to recognize that endless hostility serves no one. Eventually, every family reaches a crossroads, continue the distance, or begin rebuilding. Only those involved can decide which path to take. So, should King Charles have offered Prince Harry a room? Personally, I think that's actually the wrong question. The better question is this. Because in the end, Buckingham Palace isn't what people remember. People remember moments of humanity. They remember forgiveness. They remember reconciliation. They remember families finding their way back to one another. The conversation I watched reminded me that ordinary people often understand something institutions sometimes forget. Titles matter, tradition matters, duty matters, but family should matter most of all. Perhaps that's why this debate has resonated so deeply, not because of where Harry might spend one night, but because millions of people are quietly hoping that one day father and son won't need headlines to communicate. They'll simply talk. And that, more than any palace room, would be the real breakthrough. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's analysis, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Do you think this debate was really about accommodation, or was it about something much deeper? I'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.